Hey, it's Tommy. And despite the fact that I thought maybe nobody was watching the airshow photography in the field videos, there's actually quite a few of you out there who not only watched it, but now are looking forward to seeing how I process the airshow photos after everything is said and done. So this is that video. We're going to go and talk in kind of the perspective as if you've never done this before ever with Lightroom. Which means we're going to import the photos, go through all the metadata adding and stuff like that. Then we'll go and we'll rate the photos, how I like to rate photos very quickly and try to bring it down to a small number for editing so I don't have a huge workload to edit. And then of course at the end of that section we'll go ahead and edit the photos themselves. If you are coming from a Lightroom background and you enjoy your workflow already, you don't really need to watch the first 20 minutes or so of this video. I think it's like 25 actually, because it's a whole process that I like to do, and I'm probably going to go into further details on how to do this in a future video. But that's what it is, so go ahead and skip that and go right into the editing of the photos themselves. And then after this whole video is over and done with, I'll probably also just throw in like a few examples of the photos that I liked from the last two air shows. I hope you enjoy. I hope you learn a lot. It's pretty long-winded for what it is. I try to go in as much detail as possible. So feel free to pause it as often as you want if you do get lost or I'm, shoving too much information down your throat. Go ahead and pause it, digest some of the information, give it a shot yourself, or figure out a nice workflow for how everything's working on your own. So anyway, hope you enjoy it, and let's do it. Okay, so this is the files that I have here. I'm just using a sample size from both air shows that I attended this year so far. We're using, I just reloaded them onto the CF Express card, and we're gonna take these raw files, which is my sample size from the two. You see there's May 28th, which was the Hyundai Air and Sea show, and then April 29th was the Fort Lauderdale Air show, which is the one that you saw in the previous video. These folder examples are just going to be sample sizes, otherwise they're like 10,000 photos deep because I'm trigger happy and I like to take as many photos as possible while out in the air show. And you'll see why in a minute, why it's like really helpful to do that. But of course you got to cull the photos and you have to import them and make sure they're, something you actually want to take the time to edit them. So first things first, you got to move all these files. As you see, they're huge, 53 megabytes, and that's that 45 megapixel resolution on my Canon R5. So these are big, which is why we're only going to do 100 gigs importing, just to kind of show a little bit of a sample size here. And you have a couple options. First things first, before you do anything, you can actually go into your incoming catalog hard drive. And what the incoming catalog hard drive is literally a Lightroom catalog just for incoming photos to work on. You don't want to really put, see, here's my portfolio catalog right there, and here's my archive of random stuff that I store just in case I ever want to edit them. But these are my edited photos archive, and this is my random photos archive that I don't want to delete. If you notice, I have two separate hard drives away from this incoming catalog hard drive. The reason why is Lightroom gets bogged down very quickly going from storage and the photos that you're trying to edit at the same time. I highly recommend you have, wherever you're going to edit photos, have them in its own hard drive, and then you don't have to worry about anything. So I just have like a little 1 terabyte hard drive that I have externally plugged into my computer, and that has its own Lightroom catalog on it for stuff like this. Now what we can do is directly put the photos into the incoming catalog by creating a new folder and saying, it's nice to have a date, so we'll just put today's date, which was the 13th, and we'll say, air show photos. You could do that and then manually move these raw files into this folder right here. But what we're going to do is a different method, so you don't even have to do this little extra step. This is just if you're used to dragging and dropping files over from any other background that you're familiar with, it's better to, like this just makes you feel more secure. Like, you know, the file is going in here. You don't have to look at Lightroom doing it. You don't have to say, I believe you, Lightroom, you did the job that you're doing. So that's just one option, but we're gonna go the option of letting Lightroom copy these files from my CF Express card over. Quick little touch on this too is, here, let's get out of that. We'll double click it so it opens, and you'll see DCIM. And then here we have 100 Canon. If this was over 10,000 photos, you might see this as well. You might see this folder. And that's actually just more folder. Like more photos coming in, more folders to just that the camera had auto created. So if you're going through these photos and you're like, oh, this is cool, wait a second, I'm missing something. What happened to, you know, the next 100 photos or something I took? Check here. It might actually be on your CF Express card in this new folder, because if you see, everything has a roll over count, this 8688. When that hits 9999, the very next photo will come here into this area as 0001 or whatever. So keep that in mind when that's happening. But this is what we got. We have a lot. In fact, right now, because I'm using a sample size, this other folder is just some more photos that I wanted to use for culling, but they have similar file names to what's going on here. So we'll play with that as it goes along. But yeah, anyway, here's your photos. We got some from the Hyundai Air and Sea show. You got some from the Fort Lauderdale Air Show, and all of them are around 55, 56 megabytes, which is a huge file. So it's going to take a little bit to get all these raw files into Lightroom. So this might take a minute, but we'll go through the process now. Okay, so we have all our files here. They're ready to rock. We're going to open up Lightroom in that incoming catalog. As you can see here at this top of this page, it says incoming catalog. That's what we want. It's over here on the side as well. And all we got is just what I've done for the month, like random shots that I've taken for the month. They're not important to do for this example. We're talking about the air show photos. So we're going to go to File and then down to Import Photos and Video. And we're going to hit that. And when we're here, you have this wonderful, huge, complex dialogue going on, right? So first things first, we actually want to select the source, as it's asking me to do. And that's my CF Express card right here. You can see I already have it dropped down open so that you could see it, but you might have to click the arrow to do that based on whatever you have connected. So here we are, 100 Canon. I'm going to hit that. There might be an option saying include subfolders, which you can do. There's like a little button that'll say include subfolders, and that's very helpful. Hit that if you want to see everything. See, here's the, actually there it is, it's right here, the little check mark that says include subfolders. That includes these files here that I put. This extra set of folders that had just simply the same file name, so I needed its own folder underneath. This includes that with it. So that means in that case we could actually hit here and it's fine, or here and it's fine. So anyway, so here we are. We have all this footage. You see all the examples of the shots. They're in kind of a low resolution, but you have a grid view down here. So you could just see this bulk like this, but you could also look at them individually before you take them out. They might take a second to load. In this case, it looks very out of focus, but like it's showing, it's doing something, but you could then decide one by one what you're going to do. You could also zoom in on the photo if you want to get a good inspection on it, whatever you got to do there, and then decide if you want to include it. What I recommend is you just import everything. Don't worry about, you know, when you're doing it, how you're doing it over here in this dialog. I know some people will say like, oh, if this is a bad photo, I don't want to include that. If that's a bad photo, I don't want to include that. I just say check all, because you can go through that later and just look at each photo very quickly when we do culling, which I'll also talk about in this video. So first off, we hit our source. We're selected as copy, okay? The other option where we manually dragged the files in that I showed before, you would just go to add, and then if you notice, this whole import dialog over here has changed. All it's asking me now is some of the basic settings, putting in develop settings, metadata, keywords, adding to collections, and that's it. If we go to copy, now it needs to know where it's going to go and why it's going to go there and stuff like that. The reason why is add is so nice is after we've done that manual move of the files, all we have to do is just say, hey, this is where the files are. That's what add is. It's just saying these photos are in that folder, which in that case you would go to incoming catalog and you would select it, you know, in the drop down, which I don't have that drop down right now, but like you would select it and then boom, you're ready to rock, right? So that's a nice option, and in fact I use that option a lot, especially because Lightroom just needs to build the smart previews and things like that, and the sidecar files and things like that to be able to then work very well. You already did the slower copying of the files onto that hard drive in advance, so that's always really good. But for this example, I kind of like this method nowadays, where you just go into copy, and what you're going to do is you're literally copying photos to a new location and adding it to the catalog. So in this case, we're taking these photos that are all selected, and we're going to go and we're going to add them to incoming catalog, which is right here. See, I'm kind of highlighting it. And right now it's selected for this, which is the very last thing that I imported to, is that incoming folder on my mid-month photo dump. We're going to go to the root of this incoming catalog, and we're going to just right-click and then create new folder. And then it'll pop up, and you can start doing stuff here. So here we are, new folder. Go ahead and we'll put today's date, just like before. Oops. Air show photos, right? So create that, and now we have that, so we can choose that folder. And you see it says that this is selected. So what's going to happen is these photos that I have checked all of them are going into this folder. But before I hit import, what I would like to do is kind of look on this extra menu here. The reason why is you can skip all this and you can go ahead and hit import and it'll move those in and you could deal with this stuff later. But man, this is so useful. I recommend doing this if you can. Really do this. So right now, first things first is build previews. Embedded in Sidecar is my recommended thing to do. It kind of gives you a little bit of a best of both worlds. It gives you a nice preview that is embedded into the file and the metadata, and it changes at will. And then the Sidecar file is a good way to then you could just export all of the settings that you applied to that photo and like back it up later and stuff, and that's pretty nice. Standard gives you a really big preview, and one-to-one gives you the biggest preview, like a real resolution image. Both of these are helpful, but when you're going through the library, especially when you're culling photos, if you just do like minimal or embedded, I would say that's probably the fastest method when you're trying to run through photos really quickly, especially when we have like, you know, thousands of photos that we get at an air show. These are the two options that I would select for this, just because you don't need the best of the best looking preview when you're going through the library section. You only want to see the full-size original image in the develop module. So anyway, we're going to then build the smart preview, which gives you that little whatever preview that you selected up here. Don't worry about don't support suspected unless you have like a copy of a folder. You could also make another backup copy right here, right to the hard drive, by just simply hitting that and then choosing a location of where you want that backup to go, which is awesome because it'll just copy that over. All this, of course, takes more time, but it's really helpful to have. Then there's this add to collection ordeal that I really enjoy. You can add a collection, right, and sync it with Lightroom. So whatever you do here, say we could say air show to work on iPad or something, right? then it could sync with Lightroom, and what it'll do is it'll show up in the mobile Lightroom version, okay? So the mobile Lightroom is like both a desktop app and an iPad or a phone app. And if you add it to the collection, it'll send the smart previews up to there so that you can, you know, rate them, edit them, whatever on a mobile device. So you don't always have to be sitting in front of the computer. It'll translate all of that sidecar file information, XMP file information onto your photo. So that's really convenient when you want to add it to a collection. Then I always like to go to rename files, and my template is always date file name. As you see, there's a lot of different options. You could put the shoot name, file number, sequence, whatever you want. I always put the date and the file name, because what's going to happen is it's going to give you this cool little, like, today is 2023, July 13th, right? That'll happen in the beginning of every file. And two things happen when that happens. Number one, this file then doesn't get redundant as easy, because this might happen more than one time when I'm importing photos into this catalog, but because it's got like today's date, then last week's, you know, 3548 won't get overwritten, or, you know, when you're not importing duplicates, this, you know, then it'll actually import this photo over. So file renaming is very helpful. You can just rename right then and there, right when you're importing. And then there's also things like develop settings, where you can just add a preset if you want to, which I will talk about a little like adaptive preset that's really helpful while we're editing photos later. So you can just put it in here if you want to like ensure that that preset's applied to every photo that you're doing. And that all happens just in real time as you're putting it into the catalog. And then of course metadata, I always put like just a copyright, my name, and the year in there. You could build a little preset there by hitting new. We'll go to edit to show you what it looks like, but it's just like a dialogue, and you just put whatever information you want, and all of this information can go into the see, like GPS, altitude, direction, all that stuff can go into the photo if you want it to go in there. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so develop settings is a good one. Metadata is a good one. All that embeds into your photo. And then keywords, you can put your own keywords in here too, like air show, right? Hyundai, air and sea show, 2023. That's what I did, see? Fort Lauderdale, whoops. All these have to be separated by commas. Fort Lauderdale, right? Fort Lauderdale Air Show. So all of this is now, these are just really quick ones. Jet example, let's try that, okay? So now all of this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 4 or 5 tags, can't count apparently. 4 or 5 tags, all separated by commas. If I hit enter, those are now going to go to every single one of these photos. So it's pretty great. And then of course, destination, that's where we selected here, our airshow photos. So now we're ready. We have all of these photos ready. We have checked all, right? All this is set, and we just hit import, and it'll create that folder for us that we selected earlier, and then start putting in the photos. You'll see a little, whoops, you'll see a little progress bar at top, and then at the bottom there's a little mini progress bar in the thumbnail view as well. But now it's going to start putting them in. And as you see, we have already, it had renamed the date based on what the metadata of the photo is, because the camera puts in metadata too. If you look over here, you'll see the dimensions, file types, you see what your settings are at the time it was taken, things like focusing, speed rating, all that stuff, capture time, but you'll see date time original, capture time. So these two things will then get applied to that date file name thing that we had selected while we're importing. Then you notice if we're importing stuff, look, this little icon showed up. That's because our keywords are being entered into that as well. So it's really great. So all of this is happening. This little icon up here is actually your embedded sidecar preview icon, just saying what's going on. But yeah, this is going to take a little bit. So once this is in, then we could start playing around with the next part, which is culling the photos. And through the magic of video editing, all 370 photos have successfully imported into the incoming catalog under the Airshow Photos folder. Obviously, this really only took a few minutes. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but you know, that's a perfect opportunity to go ahead and go grab a coffee, sit on the couch, whatever you want to do. If you're me, I like to jump in the pool once I set up import, and during that importing time I just go swimming for a little bit because it is hot coming back from an air show. You're out in the sun the whole day, the sun is right on top of you, and there's no relief from it whatsoever, so it does feel great to just kind of go swimming and forget all about it when it's over. So we have all the photos open, they're in, they're ready. If you notice, each one of them has this little tag icon now, and that is the keyboard, that is the keywords that we had typed in with the keyboard earlier, and that just applied to every single photo. And then we have these little arrow keys in the top corner, and that just means that it put an embedded preview inside our original file. So what we're looking at is actually the embedded preview of the file and not the file itself. That's because we're in the library module and they want to work as efficiently as possible when we're going through these. The metadata on the side, you see all of this cool stuff. You can see that we have the file name now has the date in front of it because we put that in ourselves. The metadata preset that gives me my little copyright name thing, that's also because we put in the metadata preset. This whole metadata, most of it came from the camera itself except for the things that we've added and the keywords that we've added. But we could also add the GPS tag, which I tried to do this in a previous video a while ago. I tried to explain that you can just take a picture with your cell phone and then put that picture in with this catalog. Take the GPS metadata off of that photo of your phone and put it right here. So then when you go to the map module, you know exactly where you took this airshow photo. You know, within reason. I mean, you know, it's going to give you a general, like you were standing there, but you know, not within however many feet you're standing per photo kind of situation. It'll just be like, I was at this air show, so here is my GPS indicator. So that's a good option to have too. I always like to do that. I usually do that at the end when I out-process all these photos after I've edited them, just because it's a lot easier for me to do that, but you could do that right away. So, oh, also another thing to touch on is all these gray borders on all the photos. Your screen might not look like this. You might actually just have the photos on display. That's totally fine. It's actually an option to select and have this gray border that gives you all of the extra relevant data on the outside of the photo. Don't worry about it. We could even, maybe I might do like a whole Lightroom workflow kind of thing and talk about how to toggle that on and off. But you know, this is on by default nowadays with the new Lightroom update, and I just like it, so I left it on. So yeah, next up we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna talk about how to drop this huge number of 370 photos. In reality's sake, it'd be like 9,000 photos. So we'll figure out how to get 9,000 photos down into manageable chunks and then execute those chunks to drop it down even more so then you're actually only editing like a handful of photos that you really like and appreciate and want to share with both people or print it or whatever you're going to do there. So we're going to do that now. All right, so the first thing I want to do when I try to go through like huge amounts of files like this is I always try to group them into folders that are similar to each of the category that I'm shooting. So for example, I could see this is an F16, but here is the Blue Angels, right? So we have this F16, but then the next shot is a Blue Angel shot. So I could take every Blue Angel shot, which for this example, I did quite a bit. I think this is an F15, so we'll go down to there. If you hold shift and just click, it'll highlight all the photos, right? So then come over to your Airshow Photos folder. That almost tongue twisted me. Right click and hit create folder inside. And when you select that, you can say include selected photos and just put Blue Angels and hit create. Now it's going to move the files directly on your hard drive for you into that separate folder. Now if you notice, I could see all of them in the root directory folder, which is now, this is my root directory folder for that. But then I also have this separate folder of the Blue Angels, which is pretty great. So I'll do stuff like that to try to isolate it down to, like, see, this is F15, so let's go to F15. We're gonna hit shift again and select there, and then right click, create F15. Hit create, let that do its thing. Once it's done there, go back down. Now we have a pave hawk, it looks like. So we'll select that and do the same thing. Okay, and then we have, oh look, this is an A10, so let's take this A10 and do that. So I didn't realize I had this many categories. My sample size was kind of just an experimental one, but it seemed to work out pretty well. So F35. And then for the F16, it's only one photo. I just wanted to show it because it's from Fort Lauderdale and it's kind of far away, so it was a good example for it. But we could still just make that photo have its own folder. So now suddenly 370 photos became 20, 140, 59, 130, stuff like that. So this helps kind of give yourself like stopping points to take breaks and do whatever, because again, you're managing large amounts of files. In an A10, I might be taking 500 photos, and that's a lot of photos to deal with. All, you know, then I have to go and do like another 600 of the F35. That seems kind of ridiculous. Why would I want to do all of that in a big bulk, or why would I want to lose my place? So it's good to have all these photos in a folder of their own category. Now let me open up this really quick and show you in the incoming catalog itself, it had actually created those folders and put those files in it. So keep in mind, whatever you do folder movement wise in Lightroom, it's moving it in the background on the hard drive. What you don't want to do is take a photo like this and just, let's just say we want that photo in the incoming catalog now, and we want to put it just, I don't know, in the F35. Let's take this photo and move it over here. Watch what happens now when I go to PaveHawk. I get this icon on this photo. This photo is missing. The only thing, you could still see it, you could still edit it, but the actual photo that you're that is actually stored on the hard drive, Lightroom can't find it. So this is only the embedded preview that you're working with right now, which is a much smaller quality photo. It's very dangerous to move stuff in the background. Always move the files here. If I took this photo and I moved it into F35, it just moves it and it's there. No problem, right? Let's move that back. Okay, so we could just drag it around and move it, and that's fine. It moves it on the disk. That little warning that popped up that I just skipped by really quickly on is because it's just saying, hey, we're moving this, you know, across hard drives, just to warn you. So this photo is missing now, according to Lightroom. So you have to click on this preview and then hit locate and then manually go through and find that number, see 6934. Oh, it's not in here, so I know I put it in here, 6934, and then select and it'll start working. But look, it's gone. It moved it over to the F35 folder because that's where it originally is supposed to be. So don't move the photos through the folder method. In fact, we'll even close these out to get rid of them. But just know that when you move in Lightroom, it's moving the photos for you on the hard drive. So Lightroom's going to be in control of all that manual control that you're probably used to in other programs. So anyway, here we go. We're going to actually go through now. We have all these photos, all these folders, everything's organized and ready. So now we just can look and start doing the different methods of flagging, rating, and whatever. So it's kind of one of those situations where you might have to go several times. You can just flag photos, which is what a normal like workflow would be. You could rate photos, which is what you would do after you flag photos, because you're going to flag them whether you pick them or reject them. And then you'll rate photos and you'll pick them or reject them by giving them like a 2-star or a 1-star or whatever for editing. That's usually like the method that you would do for this. But in the case of an air show where there's something like a huge amount of photos to deal with, what I like to do is the first thing that I will go through is I will double click a photo to go into loop view. And then I just have 2 keys that I use. Technically 3 if I make a mistake, but 2 for the most part. The first is use your arrow keys, right? That's technically 2 keys, but just left and right are your keys, right? To move around and navigate across the photos. As you can see, because we have previews on, they move pretty quick, right? In fact, if I held it down, it goes pretty fast. You can see a whole burst in motion as if it was a video. So that's pretty cool. But the 2 keys that I'm going to use besides the arrow keys are the P key, which flags the photo as picked, or the U key, which takes away that flag if I actually don't want to keep it. So what we're going to do is, in this case, we don't like this photo, right? So we're just going to move to the next one. Don't like it, right? And we're just going to go through on a whole pass and see what looks cool, in my opinion. Like, I like that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's neat. Ooh, that's really cool. That's cut off, so not that one. No, no. And just, if you notice, I'm not flagging anything. I'm not rating anything. I'm not doing anything but hitting one. My left hand is on the P key, and I could just hit P if I like it. And then that was my left hand. And then my right hand will just be moving through the photos. And I can go back and forth, you know, to do whatever. And say I hit this and I'm moving and I'm like, oh, I like this one better, so let's flag this one and unflag that one with the U key. So we just play with the P and the U keys and do what I need to do until I'm done. That's cut off. So let's actually get rid of that guy. Okay, so we remove that flag. So now we're just doing this, right? And we go through and we get a selection. And that was a whole pass. See, if I liked them, I flagged them like crazy, right? If I don't like them, I unflag. I could just unflag like crazy. So this is all not something I want to keep in that pass. So in this pass, we kept quite a few and we rejected quite a few. This is one photo pass. You see how many photos are being taken as this thing's going by in the sky? That was the whole technique, keeping it steady as you're passing by, right? I took 60 photos, which is about 20 photos a second. So quite a lot of photos, right? When we go to the G key, if you hit the G key to go back to grid, or you could just click on grid preview, sometimes that window's down here for you, you'll see that some photos have been flagged and most of them have been not. So then we could go filter by flag, right? And now you only see the photos that we had selected. So that suddenly, you know, that 60 photo pass, we dropped it down to, was that a quarter of the photos that we have? And that's just on one quick run through of that particular photo pass. So now we can go through just these 15 photos. And what I like to do is give it a number 2 or a number 1. A number 1 is where I just do not want it, right? But I want to hold on to it. I don't want to delete the photo because I had already flagged it. So in this case, to shorten the time for bulk running through photos, is we're only going to give a 2 to a rating of one that we thought was really cool. So like, this is kind of neat to look at. This is going to take a little bit longer time to be inspecting because now you've already said yes to these photos. So that's where the photo, let me try to show that if I can. Yeah, photo archive, right? So my photo archive is what all these flagged photos that I never edited is good for just holding on to. The 2 stars that we're about to do are the edited ones that go in my actual portfolio. So that's kind of how I play the game when I do this. In this case, that's a 1 star for me for sure. I'm not going to rate it 1 right now. I'll deal with that in a little bit. But we're just going to go to the next photo. Whoops, I'm not on the screen. Okay, click on that. That's pretty decent, but I know by looking at these photos here, boom, look at this. These 2 wings have been lined up perfectly. So I like that photo, so I'm going to hit 2. Right? And then we're going to go through. This one's kind of, this nose is touching here. I don't really like that. Now it's got a little bit of a separation, so that's kind of worth editing to me. Right? And you're just going to go through and see what's worth editing to you. All right? That one's worth editing. I think out of these 2, this one has a little bit of a going away angle, whereas this one's kind of flat, so we'll edit that one. And that's probably good for me. So now we have flagged filter. We come over here and hit, like there's this little like icon here that says less than or equal to or greater than and equal to, depending on what it's showing at the moment. You can click there and go rating is equal to, and change that to 2 stars. And now those 15 are just 5, right? So now, of these 5, we can go a 3rd time if we really want to. We don't have to. From here, we can just start applying edits if we really want to and keep moving forward with that kind of rhythm. But say there's some that really stick out. Like I'm going through, I know down here, I brought this into view so I could show some cool examples of this. But this one on this particular jet pass, I'm missing some, so you got the nose cut off, so that's not good, right? But then I know here, look at this, boom, boom. These are cool. I really like this triangle with the little shark fin. That's pretty nice, right? Same thing with this. This vapor cone looks really cool. So, but also here, this vapor cone looks cool, and there's even like a little bit of atmospheric warp, but now it's angled weird, so I don't really want the angle. This is probably the best shot, as is this one. So I can give these 2s, but in the case of like, you know, they probably already made it to that section. So maybe in this case, since these are extra special and I really want this one to be edited first and foremost, I'll give it a 3. So we'll go back to Blue Angels to try to show that again. Filtered by flagged 2 star, we have only 5 photos. This one, the wings are touching, I really like that. Definitely gonna edit it, give it a 3. It disappears. Why? Because we're filtering by 2 stars only and a flag only. Since that's a 3-star flag now, it's gone. It's somewhere else in this folder that you can then filter later, or just click this extra 3rd star and then see it. So that one we're definitely editing. I like that. I'm gonna say out of these 5, we're gonna do this one, right? And now we have, if we go back to our grid view by hitting the G key, we have 2 photos, right? So as you know, I don't know how long I've been recording and talking, but that was like 60 photos was the pass. With flagging, we dropped that number down to 15. With giving it a 2-star rating, we dropped that number to 5. And then when we give it a 3-star rating, we now have 2 photos of that 60 that are worth editing in our eyes. So what do we do with all the other photos, right? So let's turn off the filters. You can see we now have, in the grid view, we now have a whole bunch of stuff that's just all over from that pass. So actually, let me, for the sake of this example here, let me go ahead and make this the 60 pass, just to show that. Okay, so now we're in its own folder, so you can only see these 60 photos from this one pass that I took for 3 seconds, 20 photos a second, right? You see the flags right here in the top corner. You see the star ratings. In this case, this is one of the ones we wanted to edit. This is one of the ones we wanted to hold on to as like a really good one that could be potentially editing if we want more than just 2 photos. And then flags are just the flags that we're keeping. So now what we would do in this particular grouping is we're going to filter everything by unflagged, which is the middle button here. These are all unflagged, these 45. So if we select all of these with Command and A, Control and A on a Windows computer, or you can go up to Edit and do the drop down of Select All, or you can hold Shift and click down to the bottom. So there's a lot of different ways to select all of them, but now that we selected all of these, what we'll do is we'll hit the X key and reject them all. And now, if we take off the filter, you'll see all these photos that did not get flagged are rejected. Pretty easy, pretty easy. We can do whatever we want with them now. We can completely delete them from our hard drive, because after all, we don't care to use them. We don't care to keep them. If you're afraid of deleting stuff like I am, usually I will put them into a rejected hard drive. You know, they can just get moved out of the catalog in their own way by just dragging it out of the windows, because, you know, now at that point it doesn't matter. You could just manually drag them out into a rejected hard drive. I usually hold on to rejected photos for at least a few months until that rejected hard drive says it's too full, and then I delete the oldest ones, just so I feel a lot more comfortable holding it, just in case I need it for something. Kind of a pack rat like that when it comes to photos. But anyway, now we could filter by equal sign of no stars, right? With a flag. Here's all our flags that we didn't give a 2-star or a 3-star to. So now we can shift click, select all of this like that, and give it a 1-star. So now they are 1-starred, right? Pretty simple stuff. We now have rejects, right? Actually, let's turn off the filter completely. That's this little drop down, you just select filters off. But now, as you see, we have rejects in this 60 photo pass, right? We have rejected photos that we could do something with if we want. The flagged photos that we wanted to hold on to because they were pretty cool, but we didn't really want to do anything in particular with. We gave them a 1-star rating. They will go to some other hard drive, like the photo archive hard drive. These 2 stars, I'm going to hold on to them until I'm done editing the photo, because sometimes they go into the archive with the 1 stars, and sometimes they get edited like a 3-star and go into the portfolio. That's how I like to do the ratings in this kind of ordeal. I know there's 5 stars, I know there's color ratings, I know there's all that fun stuff that you can do in Lightroom. The 4 and the 5 I use for 2 other purposes. Later in this little tutorial I'll talk about that, but that's where we're going to be for now. And that's how you rate photos. So now we have 60 photos and it dropped it down to just 2. This one and this one. Pretty cool, right? Simple and easy. All right, so I wanted to use this photo as an example for editing, just because it's one of those photos that's like not great, it's not amazing, but it is something that I can actually turn into something. So technically, in this case, we can pretend that this is a 3-star, right? So we're in the Lightroom module, as you can see, the library module, I mean, as you can see, it's an embedded preview. If we go up to the develop module and we go in here, we're now in the develop module. So we have all my presets that I have going on, right? And what I want to look at, let me just kind of come down here. Okay. So what we want to look at is some of the things that are wrong with this. So there's a lot of things wrong with this. For one, it's kind of far away from my taste, but it's a pretty big file, right? The resolution was, yeah, right there, 8192 5464. Pretty huge file. So we could still crop this one. So it's still recoverable. So let's hit the crop tool and rotate to straighten it out, right? And then we'll crop in best as we can to try to get it to be as close as I want it to be. And as you can see, this is kind of a huge amount of cropping that I'm doing here. And that makes the aircraft as large in the frame as possible. And So that's kind of makes it as usable as I can. The reason why I'm going through this example here is because of the fact that you might run into shots like this where you really like the shot and you really think the shot is cool, but it's kind of far away in the photo. So it's best to try to work with these as much as you can. So here's what I like to do with this. So after that heavy crop, you'll see that because it was shot so far away and the aircraft is pretty far away, that this gray has this really, really blue tint to it. And it's kind of flat in the sky of as far as backgrounds are concerned. So I used to do this manually, but instead of doing this manually, there's this new thing that Lightroom has that's really cool called adaptive presets. And they're on the side here. And if we go into adaptive subject, there's pop, warm pop, cool, soft, vibrant, glow, the whole bit, right? If this is a gray plane with a blue like cast to it, we can hit warm pop and change its color back. Look how fast that happened. See, this is just the preview. I didn't even select it yet. Boom. Right? If this wasn't, like if this was a colored plane, something really colorful, we might want to just hit pop and get the brightness out of it. Vibrant is another one, but as you see, it puts a lot of shadow in there. So it's kind of like a little bit, so like warm pop is probably the best for the natural gray paint job that this one has, but vibrant's a pretty good alternative too in some cases. But what you do is when you select warm pop, which you could also change the amount if you want, you can make this really warm, or you can make it very light, you know, as far as how you're applying it, right? And double click to make it go back in the middle. Every time you double click a word, it resets the slider. So that's true here. Say we're in exposure, we bump that all the way up to like, oh man, that is way too much. Go over to exposure and just double click that and it'll go back to 0. Or, you know, whatever preset you've applied to it. What warm pop did is if we go into our masking tools, which is the circle icon up here, it created a mask. See, the red is our overlay of that mask. It created a mask and just isolated this subject, and then it applied a little bit of temperature. What else did it do? A little bit of temperature, a little bit of texture, clarity, just a couple things. Didn't do like a whole lot to the mask, but it did just enough to make a pretty good little pop, for lack of a better word. So that's pretty cool. It does that. It does a very good job at that, and that's why I like to click on that. You know, if you wanted to do that manually, you would hit the mask button, you would hit create new mask, select subject, have it select the whole subject, and then play with those sliders yourself to do whatever you need to do to get it to work. All right. So once that mask is in, now it's a matter of kind of getting rid of that flatness of the plane against the background, and that's just simply playing around with things like this contrast slider, your highlight slider, and your clarity slider. Those three things will add quite a lot of texture. I used to use dehaze, but I found this puts like a little too dramatic. In fact, sometimes even putting a little bit of haze back in by going reverse in the dehaze option is pretty nice. So you're gonna wanna play with those sliders. Your biggest sliders to really make the photo pop is to play with contrast, highlights, and then your blacks. You're gonna crush your blacks a little. If you notice, you see you can either brighten them up to make them a little more detailed or crush them a little for more light. So now already the aircraft looks almost 3D. It comes through really nice with that pop, and then the color, like the pop that we did with contrast, highlights, blacks, and clarity. But then it also really helps add the overall natural color of the plane and not have the atmospheric color changing from how far away this aircraft was when we hit the warm pop mask for this aircraft. So that's kind of all you really need to do when it comes to like some basic edits. I like to go into the healing too, because as you see right here and right here, I have dust on my sensor. I was on the beach, so it's not surprising. This was the Fort Lauderdale Air Show too, because that was April 29th. And that day was very windy, so I'm sure this is probably like sand or salt spray from the ocean. So we could just go through and kind of go to the masking and click and click. And as here, I have it on heal right now, so it samples the size over. But you could also hit this one, which is the little eraser. What it does is it removes the item directly by using content-aware masking. And see, look, that's where our masks are. When I move, you don't see the dust anymore. It's gone. So we could turn that off, and now the dust is gone. Some cases, you'll take a ton of photos, and you'll see that dust in every single photo. If so, you're going to just sync the settings across the board, and that'll help put those little removal masks on for whatever you're doing. But this is pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit of saturation just to make the sky look less dingy. All right, looks a lot better. Maybe a little bit more shadow. No, maybe a little less shadow. No, I don't really like it. So I'll double click shadow and get rid of it. This is the fun part. This is the part where you just kind of play around and see what looks good to you, because the aircraft's already ready. It's got the right amount of pop coming out of the photo, the right amount of subject showing. You can add more pop if you want, more texture if you want, things like that. So the rest of it can be played. You could play with the color and make whatever kind of color changes you want to do, right? You can add presets and change things up, but I would say if you do add a preset, you should right click the icon at the bottom of the photo that you're editing, hit create virtual copy. It'll make a second fake little preview copy, and then you could adjust your presets to that one. The reason behind that is if you do add a preset to this one, it'll get rid of that warm pop if you didn't manually put it in yourself. But that's kind of it, really. Then the next step from here would be, since everything's all set and good, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that the noise on the aircraft is kind of visible. So there's a little option that Lightroom now has that's pretty awesome. And then if you come all the way down to the bottom, my sharpening's set to 40. Huh, that's a weird default. Anyway, you can increase that too if you really want to. It doesn't do too much. It does sharpen it, but it adds a lot more noise. So I don't really like that. But anyway, noise reduction. This is what we're looking for. It's this little denoise button here. What it's going to do is Lightroom now has artificial intelligence, and it'll use artificial intelligence to see what the entire image looks like. And then it'll spit out a new file, both sharpening this to an acceptable level and reducing the noise that you see both on the aircraft and in the sky. Obviously, zoomed in this much is like, yeah, obviously you're going to see a lot of noise. I mean, what did I shoot this at? 1250. So 1250 is definitely going to show noise when you zoom in this far. On social media, on even printouts and stuff, the noise isn't that big of a deal. It's not that noticeable. It's just noticeable because we're zooming in very far. So if you want to get rid of it, and actually does a really good job, what you do is you hit this denoise button right here, down, so here's all your color panels that we were just playing with. Scroll down, here's your denoise, hit that. It's going to open up a little dialog box. Don't look at the preview, in my opinion. It doesn't really show a very good preview of what it does. I mean, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. I always like to say somewhere around half the amount. In this case, I always leave it at 40. But what it'll do is it'll just merge all of that stuff once I hit enhance. Now this takes a few seconds, so we'll kind of jump to a cut. Well, I don't know, maybe it could wait. While we're waiting for this to happen, it'll create that new DNG file and it'll smooth out the noise. And that's kind of really all we're gonna do for editing. There's not a whole lot of actually editing. It's more of like managing the files, figuring out how to make your life easier by rating. That's why that one was like, I don't know, like a 20-minute segment there, because editing itself isn't that complex. There's not a whole lot going on, and now with a lot of artificial intelligence that Lightroom has, it'll allow you to do stuff very quickly. So you could just play around with how things go based on whatever you're doing, or whatever you need to do, and then Lightroom will help you along that way. So it looks like it's done, and look at this. We have this beautiful, it looks way sleeker, it looks nice, it looks 3D, the sky looks really clean. If we zoom in, because I had 40, I didn't remove all of the noise. I just have some of the noise still in the shot. In fact, some of it's a little diffraction artifact driven too, just because of, you know, AI, so there's a little bit of ripple effect, but that's because we cropped in so tightly on this particular photo. But, you know, externally as a regular photo, that looks nice. Don't you agree? I mean, I think this is pretty good. So there it is, my DNG file. If we go ahead and unstack, so right click the photo, go to stacking, and then unstack, we now have the photo with the Lightroom denoise on. And then we have the next photo over is the, whoops, the next photo over is the actual original file. Come on, load. You can do it, load. There you go, we have the original file that also looks pretty good. So it's pretty straightforward of what we need to do. Pretty easy to go. Now let's go back into Lightroom library. Let's go to something like this color set. Now this is a color photo. So what I mean by that is the aircraft's blue. It's not gray, it's not whatever. So when we go to edit this photo, I want to kind of focus on making those colors nice, right? So we can't do warm pop. If we hit warm pop, I don't know what that is, but that's not blue. That's like a dark black. You know, it kind of makes things look a little bit gross in the coloring. If we did something like vibrant, that might be a little extreme, and if we did something like pop, that might be a little hazy. So we can play with either vibrant or pop and see which one's the best one. Let's go ahead and try vibrant. Right? And now we have this dark color on the aircraft itself. If we go into the mask itself, you see that it selected everything pretty well. So I can go ahead and up the shadows of that mask if I want to. So see, I have the mask selected, and I'm just playing with the sliders there. See, here's the sliders of the whole photo. All the way up here, here's the sliders of just this mask. So you click this mask, and we're able to adjust it. So let's go ahead and up the exposure, but also crush the blacks a little to make it more realistic looking, you know, because there's shadows involved. And then we can play at the temperature if we want it really blue, but that's probably too blue, so I'll double click to get rid of that. Saturation's high, so maybe drop the saturation a little. It was at 20 earlier, so just drop it to like 12, you know, just a little bit. And then, yeah, now we have like kind of this balance where there's a lot of shadow here. I don't really like that much shadow. If I go too high, it does this weird thing that I'm not very fond of either. So let's just kind of up the shadows a little and then globally rise the whole thing by minimizing the mask, by clicking that button again to get rid of the mask. And now we're in just the global. See, there's no other drop down. So now we can just take the whole thing and brighten it up a little just because I like that better. I like the contrast a little better here, clarity a little better here. This one's one of those ones where if I went in dehaze, the blue kind of gives like a purple vibe to me that I'm not happy about. So I might reduce dehaze a little. This brightens the shadows here while at the same time making it less of this like weird color. So before, after, you can see there's already a big pop, a big difference in size. And that's just because I played with this mask that the vibrant one gave me. And then the sliders from there. I'm going to go ahead and make a virtual just to show you what the other one would do, the other direction. So here we are, pop. Could reset that. So now this is reset. If we want like a little more of a natural look, we can go to pop, get that nice little pop, brighten this up again, because this looks like it was still, even at 4000 with ISO 1000, I probably should have had this more like 3200 or this like 1600 ISO to try to get it to be bright like the way I want it to. So that's fine where it is. So that's why I upped the exposure by a little bit. And now pop still makes a mask, right? So we'll click on that mask, and now we could adjust saturation here inside this mask. Maybe the temperature a bit, make it more blue, but that looks a little hazy. So let's go ahead and add some blacks to kind of crunch it down to make it 3D pop again. I do like this yellow too, so maybe I can up the saturation a tiny bit more to get more of that, you know, or drop or increase the highlights. I don't know. There's a lot of things you could just play with right here. And like I said, if you don't like something, you could always double click it to go back to 0 on that setting, or get back to whatever the preset original default was. So here we are. That's pretty good there for me. I like that. So now we have two different photos. We have this one was done with the pop filter, right? And then this one, it's going to take a minute to load these, was done with the vibrant filter. I think out of the two, vibrant seems a little more 3D to me. So I'm going to keep the vibrant one out of the two. So I can actually get rid of that virtual copy if I want to. Then, of course, we have some dust there and noise when you zoom in, but also some dust and some dust. So let's go ahead and get rid of those with that same thing we did before, eraser tool, boop, and boop. And those, so we'll see those. Keep in mind when you apply these settings across the board to photos, this is going to keep staying in that same spot no matter what's happening in the photo. So you might get some weird thing like this happen, and then suddenly now you don't have the N there. So I would always, so after you apply everything, I would always come over, click on the little Band-Aid icon, and then just hover your mouse over to show what is where. And if you see it on the airplane, delete it. It's not that big of a deal to get rid of them, and then it doesn't ruin your shot. So all right, so we're there. We're good there. If I wanted to get rid of denoise, I could come down and hit that button again and just remove all that noise that's in the shot. But we're pretty good there, right? Maybe the sky is a little too dark in this photo, so we'll make a new subject mask by hitting create new mask, select subject, and then we'll right click that mask and invert it. And now we're selecting basically most of the background with a little bit of the plane, so we could just brighten this up a tiny bit just to make it a little bit more presentable, right? And then that's the finished photo too. So now we have a color version that we used with pop, vibrant, and we have a non-color version that we used with the warm pop to bring out the gray, the proper gray that the photo has. So that's kind of it, really. That's editing all the photos. You're going to do that for every single photo that you selected as a 3-star, right? But say you have a ton of 3 stars. Let's filter by 2s and 3s, okay? Well, 2 and greater, right? So this is all what I got. I got these 2 stars that I want to keep editing with, and I've already done one edit, pretty detailed, to this Blue Angel photo, right? If you just down here in this film strip area, if you select the one photo that you've edited, okay, then you go in either direction and you hold shift and click on all the way up to the photos that you want. You could just hit this little sync button here. Whoops, we're in library module. Sorry. You want to be in the develop module, and you click this photo that you've edited, right? And then you go over and you shift click. Now you'll see sync, you'll hit that sync button, and you'll see all these synchronized settings that you can add, including the mask. Look, we have these 2 masks here that we added. We have the crop that we added. The crop, you might have to one by one go through the photos that you want to keep editing and readjust the crop, because obviously the photo shifts as you take the photo. So you don't want to worry about that too much, but then you can just synchronize that and it'll paste the photos. It'll take a few minutes to do, or a few seconds to do the AI update as it does it. But once it's in, now suddenly you can see down here, all those photos are getting the same settings. So now if we go to a different photo, look at that. We got the same, like, well, it's got to take a second to load, but we got the same stuff applied that we did before. And it's already kind of cropped the way we like it. So I don't even have to adjust that crop. Do I have another one that does have a crop I don't like? This one. Okay, so let's go over here. And if you look in this photo, we have the crop I can readjust, right? And this one seems a little hazy still, so maybe we're gonna play with the settings there, just kind of bring it to where we need to go. And that's kind of it. That's the whole bit. So that's how we're gonna group apply everything to it. The real takeaways that I hope you get out of this is how we isolate the photos that we actually want to keep in the form of just literally going through with the arrow key and flagging first in whatever we want, right? And then if we make a mistake, you can hit, instead of the P key to flag it, you can hit the U key to remove that flag. And then once we've done that, then you go through the same photos a second run, give it a 2-star rating if you for sure would consider editing it, taking the time to edit it. And then you look at those 2 stars and you give a 3-star to those 2-star ones. You change them to 3 based on what you're gonna do. And then that isolates it down to the 3 photos that you wanna edit. All right, so that's it. That's the whole thing. It's a pretty long-winded video. I know half of it was just culling and importing the photos as they are. And then the other half is actually editing the photos. But as you could see, really the biggest part of the workflow is taking that huge number of photos that you took at the air show and dropping it down into a manageable size that then you could take as much time as you want on editing the photo. And with the help of AI in Lightroom these days, you can just, use artificial intelligence to really help speed up your workflow. If you got any information that you really enjoyed out of this, please go ahead and give me a like. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I will do my best to respond to them as quick as I can. I'll go ahead and start showing some of the photos now from both the Fort Lauderdale Air Show and the Miami Air Show that I took over the course of those 2 shows that I really enjoyed the most in that air show. Things like shock eggs and vapor cones and cool flight pattern formations. It really is a lot of fun and very rewarding to do air show photography, and I highly recommend you get out there and go give it a shot. The gear video is kind of long, but it's pretty fun to just kind of get an idea of what you would like to bring there. The field video is probably the meat and potatoes of the whole thing for like how to actually be pretty efficient out at the Fort Lauderdale Air Show or any other one that you go to, but it's taking place at that air show. And then of course processing the videos at the end of this one. So hope you enjoyed everything. Hope it's really well for you. If you want to see more photos that I have taken besides these ones that I'm showing on the screen, go ahead and follow the Instagram link at the bottom of the screen, or go to my website, which is at I think I'll put it next to the actually, and that'll be a good one to show as well. So anyway, have a great time. Get out there and have fun at your next air show. Hope this all helped. See you later.